recording. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. I can't believe I just said that. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm just still so surreal. I have recorded a couple episodes, but I feel this one might be the hardest one to record just because it's like an introductory or debut, if you will, of my podcast. So yeah, but before I started the podcast, I wanted to somewhat tell my story and to kind of kick things off a little bit, because this podcast is self-made with Ife A. Your host, me being Ife A. And if you see me looking down at my notes, it's literally because I don't want to go on a tangent. For those that know me, I tend to ramble on a bit. So to kind of just put things like in structure to the episode, I put some important stuff down. So that's why I will see me glancing down to be like, oh, what else do I have to see for this point? But like I said, for starters, for those that may not know me, my name is Ife A. Hence the name of the podcast, Self-Made Ife A. And if you're having a hard time pronouncing that, just think of effective. I feel like that's my go-to tagline right now, especially at work. My name is Ife, think of effective. But no, and I'm here with you with my first episode. I was initially planning on calling it episode 0, but things happen, people cancel. Yeah, that's just life. So I was like, you know what? I think it's strong enough to stand alone as episode 1. I am super nervous if you can't tell, but hopefully I'll kind of get into the motion of things. But the point of this episode was to kind of give a brief synopsis. And I say brief because, like I said, I really like to talk a lot. As to what this podcast is. And yeah, so like the name says, this is self-made. However tone you want to put it, it's self-made ? With Ife A. I only added the question mark recently after a conversation with my mother, who may or may not be a guest in the future. But the premise of this podcast was just to talk to up-and-coming individuals and to somewhat hear their story. So individuals that have pretty much made a name for themselves, to hear their story, because I think, and from what I've seen, I feel like society views people as, they give them the tagline of being self-made, and they may not necessarily know what they took to get there and just how long it took to get to what they're doing, or starting up their career, or building up an app, or whatever it may be. It usually is not what it seems. And the question mark is just to allow for us to dive deeper, because when building a brand or a business, people, like I said, have preconceived notions about how you got there. And I'm such a storyteller, and I thought, why not create a podcast to find out the reason, find out the why. And I wanted to create a platform to educate you, the audience, on individuals, which are going to be my guests, on just to share their story. And we'll go back to story. And this is why for the first episode, I wanted the story to be me. So for you to get to know who I am before I dive into me interviewing my guests. Because I do understand that some of you maybe have seen my face on Instagram or TikTok or maybe even LinkedIn. And if that's the case, then I really have a great squad behind me, really pushing this podcast, advertising it, telling their friends and their family. But you may not necessarily know who I am or my story. So I thought, let me dive into that a little bit before I give you that sneak peek of what I have in store for season 1. But yeah, and it's interesting though with this podcast, because I mentioned stuff about people canceling and whatnot, and you guys might come and see this podcast and be like, wow, like, if you know me, you're like, oh, Ife started a podcast? That's so cool. And the irony is just that a lot of planning went into it, a lot of nitpicking, production, the little things that I feel like no one really thinks about that I personally think about. And again, it just showed me that like everything is not what it seems. But yeah, I'm really excited to get this started. And yeah, okay, so let's dive into a little bit more about what like the podcast style. So like I said, the podcast style is an interview style. So just basically me interviewing people that I feel like I'm interested in getting to know their story. For season 1, you'll see likes of creatives, consultants, a bit of both. And I feel like I don't want to focus on a certain type of person or someone in a certain type of field. I want to be able to show the world and show you guys, my listeners, my audience, that no matter what your niche is or where you've built a brand or a startup or a career in, the stories kind of interlapped and they're very similar in some sense. And anyway, I don't want to spoil it too much, but let's dive into it a little bit. Okay, so like I mentioned, I am Ife A. Ife means love in Yoruba, so I'm actually from Nigeria. I was an international student, came to Canada for school as a student. Studied for 7 years, so did 2 years of high school, 5 years of university, and I've been working for 2+ years now. So in total, I've been in Canada for 9 years, which is a long time, considering next year will be my 10th year. So that's just crazy to me. But yeah, I am currently a Senior Technology Analyst at a Fortune 500 company, a Black woman in tech/consulting. And I feel like when people see me or see my LinkedIn or maybe just, I guess, hear about me, they may think that the path to where I am now may have been easy. And I am here to tell you that it was not. Where do I start? Okay, so I went to University of Ottawa. I studied computer science, and I never coded before. I think the only thing I had, or even made me interested in coding, was Visual Basic. I created a blackjack game. It was Powerpuff Girls themes. Bless them. Powerpuff lives a day. You'll get to know over time that I just randomly start singing, but that's the same point. I found it really interesting to create something from scratch. I thought it was really cool, and I was able to tap into a different part of my brain that I don't think I had been privy to. So I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Computer science? I need to do more of this. So I applied, got into U Ottawa, amazing. And I've always been a straight A student. I even think I put some of my identity on my grades. But essentially I went to university, first year of university. I was doing amazing. My first semester, I was acing the likes of Python, which is a programming language that we used in the first semester, and calculus, the works, okay? And then comes second semester. This is where I feel like in the movies they would do dun dun dun. The second semester comes and it's a new programming language. It is I think it's ITI 1200 or something like that. But it was Java. If you know, you know. Starting computer science, or my computer science degree, learning Python seemed like a walk in the park. I was like, oh, I'm in for a bliss. Like, if this is what computer science is, call me a genius, because I'm here. I'm literally here to stay, right? But Java was something different. And it was interesting because, like, this was the sentiment shared with the rest of the class, at least those that hadn't done Java before. It was just so different because it's like going from riding a bike to riding a motorcycle, right? Like your training goals to going on two-wheeler. Like it was just completely different. Java was super complex in my mind. I will give you an example. So with Python, in order to print something, to like maybe when you text something and then you want to send, like hit send, like kind of like that idea. To print something, it would just be print the colon, and in your quotations, you would put what you want to print out. Whereas in Java, it is system.out.print. And if you want it to be different lines, it would be print ln, and then you put the quotations and then your word. So this is editing Ife. I was editing and then I realized that I said colon and semicolon. I meant brackets. I don't know what was on right now when I was recording. I think I recorded it super late in the night. But for those trying to learn, and they're probably confused at the syntax that I said, I meant brackets. Okay. Anyways, I hope that didn't confuse you too much. Back to the episode. So already we can see like it's already adding more words to it than need be. And I was just so confused. I was like, oh my gosh. But your girl was relentless. I was very, very, very... Is relentless the right word? Resilient? Not me learning words while I'm filming. Let me check this out. Resilient? Relentless? Relentless. Okay. Resilient. Oh. Well, let's just say I just didn't give up. Oh my gosh. So I was like, I'm gonna keep doing. I'm gonna keep trying. Because this is my first year of university. I'm about to make a name for myself. The first year should be like, it's your foundation. And this is what the thoughts that were going through my mind as I was doing all of this. And I remember, obviously the professor was writing stuff on the board. It just wasn't entering, it wasn't clicking. And I was just so very confused. I was like, what is this? This just seemed like a different language. The pun is like, I guess it was, but like, it just seemed like not something that my mind was able to fully like grasp, you know? And I remember studying. Okay, I'm studying for this midterm, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna try, right? Because it's like, there's only so much I can do. Try my best, and I studied my butt off for this midterm. And I remember when I was finished, I was like, yeah, no. You know when you fail a midterm, like you can just tell that you failed? That was how I felt in that moment. And it's so crazy because it's like, I remember calling my father and I was just like, yeah, I don't think comp sci's for me. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm pretty sure I failed. He's like, I was like, yeah, maybe like, maybe I should do something that is just like business or something that just doesn't involve Java. Okay. Like I was like, yeah, no, this is not for me. And my father, as corny as it sounds, or as cliche as it sounds, he was like, did Albert Einstein give up when he was discovering, E equals MC squared? Did Thomas Edison give up when he was, working on the light bulb? Did Mark Zuckerberg give up when he was, working on Facebook? I was like, no, sir. He was like, then are you going to give up? And I was like, no, I am not. My father does not sound like that, but, just for dramatic sake, I kind of made it more huskier and lower and whatever. But the point being, like, he kind of pumped me up to encourage me that I shouldn't give up. And I was like, well, I feel like I kind of need to drop the course because it's going to affect my GPA significantly. And he was like, fair enough. And dropping the course was literally the best thing I could have done because I did really well that semester. Awesome. And I ended up taking the Java course in the summer semester. And taking that course, I remember coming in with a fresh mind. I was like, I'm ready to tackle you. I think that was the only course I was taking. So it was like, this should be a walk in the park. Again, I had that optimistic mindset of I'm going to ace it. But at the back of my mind, I'm still kind of nervous. I remember coming into my first class. I'd gone to Tim Hortons, got myself an iced lemonade, on a hot Canadian summer day. And I sat with someone in the class. So like I knew someone in the class. So I was really excited. I was like, oh, we could do assignments together. Like I was really pumped. And as the teacher was writing on the board, or a professor, I was kind of getting flashbacks. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? This is going to be crazy. Am I going to understand it? And it was weird because I was getting it. Like she was explaining it and I was getting it. Like it was entering. And looking back, I think I kind of figured that it may have been a combination of my mindset, the professor, and just like the willingness to learn. I kind of came in open-minded, ready to absorb everything. Whereas with Java, as soon as I saw whatever he put on the board, I kind of like zoned out. I tuned out. I was like, this is not for me. But anyway, back to the story. So I'm getting it. I'm writing code literally on paper before I put it on the computer. I'm doing all these things and it is clicking. It is entering. It is like a light switch has been turned on. Mans is getting it very well. And the midterm season comes, right? And I feel like this is the perfect determinator, just to determine if I've understood what I've been learning, right? And to practice, most times in school, you would do like past midterm questions because the curriculum is the same, but like professors would kind of change the way the questions are worded. But I remember doing the midterm, and guess what? It was literally the midterm of the previous semester, so winter 2016. And I was like kind of nervous. I was like, yo, like I feel this. And I remember opening it and I was like, oh, this is easy. I know this. And I did it. And guess what? I got 100% in the midterm review. Like the TAs marked it. They ought to do that because it was like a much smaller class. And I got 100%. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like this midterm was what I was going to be the deciding factor of me leaving computer science program, me dropping out of computer science program, if not for my father giving me the whole spiel about Mark Zuckerberg, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, all that stuff. But I was like, yo, like, this is serious. Like, I was like, did I actually do that? Like, I did that. Like, what? And I was flabbergasted, to be honest. Like, I was kind of stunned and amazed because I was like, was this actually the midterm that I had failed woefully? The midterm that I was going to let decide my future? And it was. And I ended up getting like an A or an A+ in that course. And it was just crazy because I was just like looking back, like obviously with God's grace, and I was able to ace the class, but as well as like just my father motivating me, my mom being there for me, it really put me on course to what I was going to do throughout my years at university. And obviously fast forward, and I was like going through ups and downs in university and comp sci. I was gonna say as we all, but some people were straight A's throughout, so can't relate. And I remember like I needed to take like an extra year. I called my dad again. I was like, hey, listen, like I might need to take an extra year of university. Is that okay? So technically I was supposed to graduate 2019 because I started 2015. I say technically because that's when most of my friends were also graduating. And he's like, yes, like, you know, we wanted you to finish strong, you know, God willing, you know, the works of that. And I was just kind of like sad because I was like graduating later, but I was like, you know what, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And 2019, honestly, this year I feel like was my best year yet, but 2019, I remember I bumped into an old friend, in the cafeteria. So in Sight, if you go to U Ottawa, if you an alum of U Ottawa, you know what I'm talking about. It was like the tunnel between Sight and Conal. And essentially, he was like, oh, like I just got a job at this company. You should apply. I was like, really? What's the job description? And he sent it over to me, and I was like intimidated because what I was seeing, I was like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm that. I kept on doubting myself. And again, kind of talking to my father. I think he's my hype man. my parents are, and he was just like, just apply. Like the worst they can say is no. Like you're not going to be worse off for it because you don't have a job. And I was like, you're a smart man. You. That's why you're dad. So essentially I did that and I applied, and literally, like, kid you not, the next day I got a call from the recruitment team, and it's just like, hey, like, I'm speaking to Ife, like, saw your resume, really impressed. Do you mind like me asking you a couple questions? And I sold myself. Like, I was like, yes, I did that. I did this. I did that. I did this. I did that. And you know that like red carpet moment, or I guess this is what I call red carpet moment. That moment where you're on the red carpet, or just imagine you're on the red carpet and they're like, who are you wearing? Oh, like, how do you feel about this movie you just filmed? Or how do you feel about this music you just released? That was like my red carpet moment. And for so long, I've tried to humble myself and put myself in a box, essentially. But in that interview or in that screening or whatever it is called, I was able to kind of have that red carpet moment for myself and be like, I did that. Oh my God, I did that too. Oh wow. Oh yes, I did all of that. And kind of put a spotlight on myself. And she was obviously impressed. And she invited me to the in-person interview. And I remember my mom calling me the day before the interview, asking if I'd studied, because both my parents are HR professionals, so they're giving me like tips and whatnot, because they work in HR. So I was like, yeah, I've studied, like I'm good. I prayed a bit, and honestly, I always say that I'm a prophetess, but I feel like God revealed like certain parts that I should study, so I did that too. So I apologies.
You're listening to Self-Made with Ife A.
Okay, so essentially, the next day came. It was time for the interview. I picked the earliest slot because I am a morning person through and through. Still am. And I remember I went there and they gave me a little name tag with my name on it. I was like, oh, this is so official. Like, I was like strutting my stuff. I was like, yes, I'm ready. And then I went into the interview because there were 2 interviews. It was like a technical interview and a closed interview. I went into the interview. I was nervous, so nervous. Because I was like, well, this could potentially be like the start of my career. I don't know if I mentioned this, but like I had not had like a good year, like in regards to like school. Like it went up for a while, then it went down. So I just needed an up again. But essentially, the interviewer like introduced himself, and I remember he like said where he was from and where he studied, and I think he said like University of Pretoria or something. And I was like, oh my god, South Africa! Like I grew up in South Africa. I lived there for like 6 years, and essentially, I was like, oh, Pretoria, maybe he speaks Afrikaans. So like I like dabbled. I like tried to speak Afrikaans. I don't even know what I said to him, but he laughed, and it was like a way to kind of make me like relaxed in a sense. And that interview went so well. Like till this day, I to be honest, I don't even remember how like what I said or whatnot. I don't know what came over me, but it was like something came over me. But I was just like going at it. And then like the close interview, same thing. I mentioned that I was passionate about giving back. I used to volunteer at Auto Mission because of my sorority. Oh yeah, that was another thing too. Fun fact, was in the sorority. And essentially, like they're like, "Oh, you're in a sorority? How are you able to do that with, computer science? Like, how does that work?" So that was something they were already intrigued by. But essentially, I was like, "Yeah, like I love giving back. Like I love, like I was able to tap into my philanthropic side that I didn't know I had, but I was able to do that." And essentially, it was just like that connection. And I feel like that's something my parents always tell me is like trying to find like a mutual ground or like a common ground with your interviewer, because you're more memorable that way. Like obviously do your work, make sure in terms of what exactly you're interviewing for. But yeah, and I got a call, I got the offer, and I guess here I am now as a Senior Technology Analyst. But I say all this to say that like looking at me, you wouldn't have known like I went through all of that. Like I almost dropped out of computer science. And also, I almost didn't apply for this job. But at the end of the day, I had people in my corner. So first and foremost, God. I will always give thanks to God. I feel like He was the reason I found like the people in the first place. Like I bumped into my friend coincidentally. And my parents really supported me through everything I did. So it was through my academics. They paid for my tuition, but just through life in general, by mentoring me, and helping me to kind of get to the position I'm in now. And obviously, like, I still have a lot of growing to do, and I may not necessarily have like that business or that brand. I guess Ife A is now a brand, but I feel like just telling my story kind of gives you a kind of glimpse as to what I'm trying to do here on Self-Made with Ife A podcast. So allow me to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Ife A. I don't think I'm self-made, but I worked really hard to get to where I am today. And I'm really looking forward for you guys to come with me on this journey of Self-Made with Ife A podcast, to hear the stories that I was able to kind of find out. So this is season 1. I hope you guys liked my little introductory episode. I hope it wasn't too serious. I hope it pulled you in. I hope it made you cry a little bit. I'm joking. No tears. No tears left to cry. That was me almost breaking out a song, but I didn't. I held it in. But yeah, next week we get to find out the man behind the camera. I wonder who that is. But stay tuned. You're watching Self-Made with Ife A podcast.
Next week on Self-Made with Ife A.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yo, what's up, guys? Nelson EGH.
Amazing. You heard that here first. Nelson EGH.
Yes, sir.